I still remembered the antiseptic smell of the hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of machines counting down a life that was fading too quickly. Sunshine streamed through half-drawn blinds, creating bars of light across Marianne's gaunt face. She'd been beautiful once, the kind of effortless beauty my husband Tom had fallen for 20 years ago, before our paths crossed. "Linda," she whispered, her fingers, cold and fragile as bird bones, gripping mine with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll take care of Derek." I looked at the boy slumped in the corner chair. 12 years old, hollow-eyed, trying so hard to be brave. His father, my husband, stood beside him, a steady hand on his shoulder. Tom and I had been married for 8 years by then. I'd always been careful with Derek, never pushing, never trying to replace Marianne during his weekend visits. But now everything was about to change. "I will," I said, meaning every syllable. "I'll love him like my own." Her eyes, the same deep brown as her son's, searched mine, looking for any hesitation. There was none. "Thank you," she breathed. 2 days later, she was gone. I was 52 then, with plans for the consulting business I'd been dreaming about starting after decades in corporate finance. Tom and I had talked about traveling, maybe buying that cabin in Vermont. Children hadn't been part of our plan, not because I didn't want them, but life had simply taken a different direction. Now suddenly I had a grieving preteen boy moving into our guest room, bringing garbage bags full of clothes and a silence so deep it echoed. The first months were the hardest. Derek would barely speak, picking at his food, disappearing into his room for hours. I respected his grief, gave him space, but made sure he knew I was there. I learned to cook the meals Marianne had made him. I listened when he finally started talking about her. Tom was grateful but struggling himself, watching his son suffer while managing his own complicated grief for his ex-wife. He'd always been a good father, but parenting a traumatized child required a different kind of presence. Often after Derek went to bed, Tom and I would sit in exhausted silence, wondering if we were doing enough. 6 months in, the breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. I'd been baking cookies, something I rarely did, following Marianne's recipe that Derek had shyly shared. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and chocolate when Derek wandered in. "You did it wrong," he said, the first unsolicited words he'd spoken in days. "Show me," I replied, stepping back from the counter. For 2 hours we made batch after batch, Derek insisting they weren't quite right, until finally, flour dusting his dark hair, he took a bite and nodded. "That's Mom's cookie," he said, and then burst into tears. I held him while he cried, this boy who wasn't mine but who was becoming part of my heart with each passing day. That night, Tom found us asleep on the couch, surrounded by cooling cookies, Derek's head on my shoulder. "You're a miracle," Tom whispered when I opened my eyes. Years passed. My consulting dreams got tucked away. Instead, I became a room parent, a soccer mom, a homework helper. I learned to navigate parent-teacher conferences and teenage mood swings. I took a part-time job with flexible hours so I could be home when Derek needed me. Tom and I postponed the Vermont cabin indefinitely. When Derek was 16, Tom had a heart attack. Massive, sudden. The doctor said he never felt a thing. Just like that, our family of 3 became 2. At the funeral, Derek stood beside me, his hand finding mine as the casket was lowered. He was taller than me now, his voice changing, his face losing its childhood softness. I worried that losing his father on top of his mother would be too much, that he might pull away. Instead, one evening about a week after the funeral, he came into the living room where I sat staring at photo albums, unable to sleep. "Mom died and now Dad," he said simply, sitting beside me. It was the first time he'd called me anything other than Linda. "But I still have you, right?" I turned to him, this boy who carried so much of his father in his face, and said the words I'd been feeling for years but had never spoken aloud. "You're my son, Derek. No matter what." And I meant it with every fiber of my being. The college acceptance letter came on a rainy Tuesday. I heard Derek swoop from the driveway as he checked the mail. Stanford, his dream school. I smiled, remembering all those late nights helping with application essays, the campus visits, the anxious waiting. I got in. He burst through the door, waving the envelope like a victory flag. "They want me." "Of course they do," I said, catching him in a hug. I never doubted it for a second. We celebrated that night with takeout from his favorite Thai place. Only after he went to bed did I allow myself to look at the financial aid package again. The scholarship covered about half, impressive, but nowhere near enough. Derek's portion of Tom's life insurance was already earmarked for tuition, but it wouldn't stretch to cover 4 years at Stanford. The next morning, I called my financial advisor. You understand what you're doing, right? Gloria said, her voice carefully neutral. Taking from your pension early means penalties. It means working longer. I understand, I replied, watching through the window as Derek mowed the lawn, earbuds in, completely unaware of the conversation happening inside. But he deserves this chance. I never told Derek where the extra money came from. Let him believe it was all from his father's planning, from scholarships, from my careful budgeting. The truth was I took double shifts at the accounting firm. I canceled my annual girls' trip to the beach. When my car needed replacing, I bought used instead of new. The summer before his junior year, Derek came home with big news. An internship opportunity in New York, prestigious, career-making, but unpaid. I can't afford New York, he said, shoulders slumping as we sat at the kitchen table. Maybe I should just find something local. I hesitated only for a moment before saying, you'll go to New York. We'll figure it out. The next day, I took my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones Tom had reset for our 5th anniversary, to a jeweler. They funded Derek's summer apartment deposit. My wedding ring followed when his laptop died mid-semester. I never quite managed to buy replacements. Derek graduated with honors. I sat in the audience bursting with pride, clapping until my hands hurt as he crossed the stage. He'd grown into a handsome young man, confident, articulate, ambitious. So much like his father, with occasional glimpses of Marianne in his smile. After graduation, job offers came quickly. A tech company in Seattle. Good money, excellent benefits. I helped him pack, pretending not to notice how many of the boxes contained things I bought him over the years, the expensive winter coat, the laptop, even the matching luggage set I'd splurged on as a graduation gift. You could come with me, he offered as we drove to the airport. Start fresh somewhere new. For a brief moment, I considered it. But my life, my few remaining friends, my part-time job, they were all here. And truthfully, my finances wouldn't stretch to Seattle's cost of living. Not after everything. This is your adventure, I said instead. Fly free. The calls came regularly at first. Updates about his apartment, his colleagues, the Seattle weather. Then gradually they became less frequent. Texts instead of calls. Social media comments instead of texts. I watched his life unfold through carefully curated photos. Derek at office parties. Derek hiking spectacular Pacific Northwest trails. Derek with a pretty blonde named Amy who eventually became a fixture in his posts. When he did call, the conversations grew shorter, more perfunctory. I told myself this was normal, healthy even. He was building his own life. That's what I had raised him to do. On my birthday 3 years after he moved, my phone remained silent. I checked it repeatedly, certain I'd somehow missed his message. Nothing. The next day, a belated text arrived. Asterisk, sorry, crazy week at work. Happy birthday. Talk soon. Asterisk. Christmas came with a gift card sent by express mail 2 days after the holiday. Mother's Day passed unmarked. When I had minor surgery, my friend Beth stayed with me because Derek was in the middle of a major project deadline. I never complained. Never guilt. What purpose would it serve? He was busy building the successful life I'd sacrificed to help him achieve. That was enough. Or so I thought, until Beth came over for coffee one Wednesday afternoon, her expression unusually serious as she settled at my kitchen table. I ran into Patty Wilson yesterday, she said carefully. Patty's son had gone to high school with Derek. She mentioned Derek called her husband. Oh. I poured coffee, trying to sound casual though something in Beth's tone made my stomach tighten. Robert is a financial lawyer now, Beth continued, watching me closely. Patty said Derek was asking questions about your pension plan. About beneficiary rights and guardianship claims. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, crashing to the floor in a spray of ceramic and dark liquid. Linda. Beth was on her feet instantly. Are you okay? I wasn't. Not by a long shot. I didn't want to believe it. Not Derek. Not my son who I'd raised for 15 years, who I'd sacrificed everything for. There had to be a misunderstanding. I called him that evening, trying to keep my voice steady as we exchanged pleasantries. He sounded distracted, traffic noise in the background suggesting he was walking somewhere. Derek, Beth told me something strange today, I finally said. She heard you've been talking to Robert Wilson about my finances. About my pension. The silence that followed stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. Derek. I'm here. His voice had changed, taken on a coolness I'd never heard directed at me before. I was going to talk to you about this, but I wanted to understand the legal side first. My hand tightened around the phone. Legal side of what exactly? Your pension plan. And the house. The words came faster now as if he'd rehearsed them. You've been my legal guardian since I was 12. That creates certain financial entitlements. Not all of them were properly documented when Dad died. I sank into a chair, suddenly unable to stand. Entitlements. It's just smart planning, Linda. He'd switched back to my name, I noticed. Not Mom. You're getting older. We need to make sure everything's properly arranged. We. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Or you. Don't make this personal, he said, an edge creeping into his tone. It's just finances. Just finances. Just the pension I'd already borrowed against to put him through college. Just the house where I'd raised him, the only asset of value I had left. I gave you everything I could, I said quietly. And I appreciate that, he replied, his voice softening slightly. But this isn't about appreciation. It's about what's legally right. Legally right. Not morally right. Not emotionally right. The distinction cut through me like a blade. I need to go, I managed to say. We'll talk about this later. I hung up before he could respond and sat in the darkening kitchen as night fell, remembering another conversation from years ago. Tom and I had been discussing Derek's attitude about a car we couldn't afford to buy him for his 16th birthday. He's still a child, Tom had said gently. One day he'll understand what matters. But Derek wasn't a child anymore. He was a grown man making a calculated move against the woman who had raised him, loved him, sacrificed for him. The next day he showed up at my door unannounced. Dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, he looked like a stranger. We need to finish our conversation, he said, stepping past me into the foyer. I followed him into the living room, noting how his eyes swept over the familiar space, seeming to assess and appraise rather than remember. I've consulted with Robert, he continued, setting his leather portfolio on the coffee table. There's a strong case for me having partial claim to your pension since I was a dependent during the years you were contributing to it. The house is more complicated, but... Stop. My voice was quiet but firm. Just stop, Derek. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face. I'm trying to help you organize things properly. No. You're trying to take what little security I have left after giving you everything else. That's not fair, he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. This is about making sure everything's in order. In order for what? For whom? I moved closer, willing him to really see me. I worked double shifts while you were in college. I sold my jewelry to pay for your New York internship. I put off my own dreams so you could pursue yours. I never asked you to do those things, he said, a defensive edge hardening his voice. No. You didn't have to ask. That's what parents do, Derek. They give without being asked, without expecting repayment. He shuffled the papers in his portfolio, clearly uncomfortable. This isn't about repayment. It's about protection. Protecting whom? Because it certainly isn't me. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of uncertainty in his expression, quickly replaced by that cool, professional mask. You're being emotional about a practical matter, he said. Maybe we should discuss this when you're thinking more clearly. The condescension in his tone was the final straw. In that moment, everything shifted inside me. The love remained, it would always remain, but something else crystallized alongside it. A boundary. A recognition. I think you should leave, I said calmly. Linda. Now please. He gathered his papers, his movement stiff. At the door he paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I'll call you in a few days, he said. We can approach this more rationally then. I didn't answer, just watched as he walked to his rental car. As he drove away, I closed the door quietly, leaning my forehead against its cool surface. In the silence of my home, the home where I'd raised a boy who had never truly become my son, I finally allowed myself to cry. The offices of Harrington and Associates had the hushed, wood-paneled dignity that comes with a century-old legal practice. Janet Harrington had been Tom's lawyer, then mine. At 72, she still worked full-time, her mind sharp as ever behind stylish red glasses. Linda, she said warmly, rising from behind her imposing desk. It's been too long. I settled into the visitor's chair, placing my purse carefully beside me. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Janet sat back down, folding her hands on the desk. Your message sounded urgent. What can I help you with? I took a deep breath. I need to change my will. And my pension beneficiary. And my life insurance. My voice didn't waver, though my hands, folded in my lap, certainly did. Janet's expression remained professional, though her eyes showed concern. That's quite comprehensive. May I ask what's prompted this? Slowly, methodically, I told her everything. Derek's consultation with Robert Wilson. The conversation about entitlements. His dismissal of my concerns as emotional. By the time I finished, Janet's expression had hardened. I see, she said, making a quick note. And you're certain about changing all these designations? Completely certain. She nodded once briskly. Who would you like to name instead? The answer came easily. Grace Thompson. Janet raised an eyebrow. Beth's daughter. Yes. A small smile crossed my face despite everything. She's 30 now. Did you know she's running that literacy program for disadvantaged girls? The one I've been volunteering with. Grace had been in Derek's class at school. While he pursued finance and technology, she'd chosen education and nonprofit work. I'd mentored her informally for years, delighted by her compassion and determination. When my own child had slowly withdrawn from my life, Grace had somehow drawn closer, dropping by with soup when I had the flu, calling regularly just to chat, sending handwritten cards on holidays. Janet made another note. She'll be surprised. I know, but it feels right. I hesitated. I'd also like to draft a letter. To Derek. Something to be delivered with the legal notification. For the next 2 hours, Janet and I worked through the details. Pension beneficiary forms. Insurance designations. A new will. With each signature, each official stamp, I felt the cord connecting me to Derek, the one I'd maintained for so long, begin to loosen. The letter was the hardest part. I went through draft after draft, discarding anything that sounded bitter or vindictive. This wasn't about punishment. It was about finally acknowledging a truth I'd denied for years. Derek, I write this with a heavy heart but clear mind. When I promised your mother I would care for you, it was a vow I took more seriously than any other in my life. I have no regrets about the sacrifices I made. They were given freely with love. What I didn't realize until recently was that you and I fundamentally misunderstood our relationship. I saw you as my son. You saw me as a guardian with financial obligations. I accept that now, and I'm adjusting accordingly. I've changed my will, pension beneficiary, and insurance designations. You are no longer listed on any of these documents. This isn't done in anger. It's done with the clarity that comes from finally seeing a situation truthfully. You're an accomplished young man with a bright future, exactly what your mother and father would have wanted. My financial resources, modest as they are no longer your concern. You were never a burden, Derek. But now I know I was. Linda. Janet read it silently, then looked at me over her glasses. This is going to hurt him. I know. I folded the letter carefully. But sometimes the truth hurts. As she prepared the final documents, I glanced at my phone calendar. Derek's birthday was exactly 7 days away. He'd be turning 29. Almost certainly planning some elaborate celebration as he did every year, documented extensively on social media. Janet, I said as she handed me the envelope containing my copies of everything we'd prepared, when will the official notifications be sent? We can process everything immediately, she replied. The notifications can go out whenever you'd like. I met her eyes steadily. Next Thursday, please. By courier if possible. She didn't ask why that specific date. I think she already knew. Back home, I found the brightest red envelope I had. Into it went Janet's business card and a short note. The attached documents require your immediate attention. Please direct any questions to Janet Harrington. I addressed it carefully in my neatest handwriting, added Derek's birthdate to the corner where a stamp would go, and set it on my desk. In 7 days, it would begin its journey, carrying with it the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years. Derek's birthday arrived crisp and clear, a perfect spring day. I knew from his social media that he had planned a lavish celebration at his Seattle waterfront apartment. Throughout the morning, photos appeared online, an elaborate breakfast spread prepared by his girlfriend Amy, champagne toasts with colleagues, dozens of wrapped gifts piling up on a designer console table. I didn't call, didn't text. For the first time in 17 birthdays, I sent nothing. Instead, I spent the day cleaning out my closets, donating 3 bags of clothes to the women's shelter, and planting new flowers in my garden. At 5 o'clock, just as the courier in Seattle would be arriving at Derek's building, my doorbell rang. Beth stood there, holding a bottle of wine and wearing a concerned expression. "You're actually doing it," she said as I let her in. "It's done," I corrected, leading her to the kitchen where I'd already set out 2 glasses. "The notification should be arriving right about now." Beth uncorked the wine, studying my face. "How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully as I accepted a glass. "Free," I finally said. "Sad but free." We toasted quietly, and I tried not to imagine the scene unfolding 3,000 miles away. The courier at the door. The unexpected interruption to the birthday festivities. Derek's confusion as he signed for an official-looking envelope. "Do you think he'll call?" Beth asked after a while. Eventually, I replied. "But not today." I was wrong. The call came at 8:43 p.m. my time. Derek's contact photo flashed on my screen, an older picture from his college graduation, one where he was smiling directly at the camera. At me. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again immediately. Then again. On the 4th attempt, I picked up but said nothing. "What the hell is this?" His voice was tight, controlled fury vibrating through each syllable. "Hello, Derek," I said calmly. "I take it you received the documents." "On my birthday?" "You had them delivered on my birthday." Disbelief colored his tone. "In the middle of my party?" "Yes." The single word seemed to throw him. He'd clearly expected denials, perhaps apologies. "Why would you do this?" he demanded. "Cut me out completely?" After everything." "After everything," I echoed softly. "Yes, exactly. If this is about that conversation with Robert Wilson." "It's about 17 years of giving everything I had," I interrupted, my voice still calm. "And then discovering you were calculating how to take what little I had left." "That's not," he began, then stopped. In the background, I could hear murmured voices, music, the sounds of the party continuing around him. "Can we discuss this privately?" "Like adults." "We are discussing it privately," I pointed out. "And I made my adult decision with full legal counsel. The documents explain everything." "You named Beth's daughter as your beneficiary?" The incredulity in his voice was almost comical. "Some girl you barely know over your own son?" "Grace isn't some girl," I corrected. "She's a compassionate young woman who sees me as a person, not a financial resource. And you were never legally my son, as you recently took pains to clarify." Silence stretched between us, heavy with all the things we'd never said to each other. All the things we should have said. "I'm sorry if I hurt you," he finally said, his voice smaller now. "But this response is extreme." "It's not a response, Derek. It's a decision. One I made with the same care I've made every decision regarding you since you were 12 years old." More silence. Then, almost plaintively, "So that's it? You're just cutting me out of your life?" The question caught me off guard. In all my planning, all my careful legal arrangements, I hadn't actually decided that part. Could I truly sever all ties with the child I'd raised? Wanted to love me? "The financial arrangements are final," I said carefully. "As for the rest, that's up to you." I heard him take a shaky breath. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "I know you don't," I replied softly. "That's the tragedy of it all." Through the phone, I heard a woman's voice, presumably Amy, calling his name, asking if everything was okay. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "This isn't over." But it was. We both knew it. After he hung up, I sat in my silent kitchen, the untouched wine still in my glass. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. Simply sat with the knowledge that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who can hurt us beyond measure. And sometimes the only way forward is to simply let go. In Seattle, the birthday party continued. Guests laughed, drank expensive champagne, admired Derek's new gifts. But in social media posts that appeared later that night, Derek was noticeably absent from the photos, the red legal envelope nowhere to be seen. 6 months after Derek's birthday, I sold my house. The market was favorable, and the modest 4-bedroom suburban home where I'd raised a family brought more than I expected. Combined with my pension and careful savings, it was enough. The lakeside cottage had been on the market for nearly a year, too remote for most buyers, too small for families. For me, it was perfect. 1 bedroom, a sunroom overlooking the water, and blessed quiet. The closest neighbor was half a mile away, the nearest town 20 minutes by car. Moving day came in early autumn. Beth and Grace helped, making endless trips up and down the cottage's narrow stairs with boxes and furniture. By sunset, we sat on the small dock, feet dangling in the cool water, sharing pizza and beer. "Are you sure about this?" Beth asked, gesturing at the isolated cottage. It's beautiful, but it's so far from everything. I smiled, watching golden light reflect off the lake's surface. I'm not far from what matters. Grace squeezed my hand. We'll visit all the time. Promise. They left as darkness fell, headlights disappearing down the winding drive. For the first time in decades, I was truly alone. The silence was so complete I could hear fish jumping in the lake, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. I slept that night with windows open, lake air filling my lungs, and dreamed of nothing at all. The first month passed in a blur of settling in. I arranged my bookshelves, planted bulbs for spring flowers, found the perfect spot for my reading chair by the big front window. Twice weekly, I drove into town to volunteer at the local library's adult literacy program. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. Derek called 3 times. I let each call go to voicemail. His messages grew progressively shorter. The first, long and emotional, begged for conversation, for understanding. The second suggested meeting with mediators present. The third, just 15 seconds, it's me. Call if you want to talk. I didn't call. Thanksgiving approached. Grace invited me to join her and Beth at their home. I accepted gratefully, bringing homemade cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie. During dessert, Beth carefully mentioned that she'd run into Derek's girlfriend Amy at the airport. She asked about you, Beth said, watching my reaction. Said Derek's been different since everything happened. I nodded, neither pleased nor displeased by the information. I hope he's well. Beth and Grace exchanged glances but didn't push. Winter settled over the lake, freezing its edges into delicate crystal patterns. I bought snowshoes, explored the woods surrounding my new home. For Christmas, I volunteered at a shelter in town, serving meals and distributing donated gifts. My small cottage accumulated its own decorations, pine boughs gathered from my property, candles in the windows, a tiny tree that Grace helped me decorate when she visited. In January, a letter arrived handwritten, postmarked from Seattle. Dear Linda. Asterisk, I've started this letter a dozen times over the past months. Nothing I write seems adequate. I was wrong. Not just about the legal matters, but about everything. I've been seeing a therapist who's helping me understand how I've treated you and why. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. Just letting you know that your message was received, painfully but clearly. The woman I hope to marry has helped me see what you tried to show me for years, that family isn't about entitlement but about love freely given. Asterisk. Asterisk, you were never a burden. Never. I was too blind to see the gift I had in you. Asterisk. Derek. I read it twice, then placed it in a drawer of my desk. I didn't respond, but neither did I throw it away. Spring came early to the lake. I expanded my garden, adding vegetables to the flowers now pushing through the soil. Grace visited regularly, sometimes bringing friends from her literacy program. One young woman, a single mother working toward her GED, brought me fresh eggs from her chickens in exchange for math tutoring for her son. On Mother's Day, an enormous bouquet arrived from a local florist, the card simply signed Derek. I arranged the flowers in my favorite vase and placed them on the kitchen table where sunlight caught their colors. I sent no acknowledgement. Summer brought swimming in the lake, evenings reading on the dock, a steady stream of visitors drawn by the cottage's peaceful setting. I started a small remote consulting business, using my financial expertise to help women in transition manage their resources. The work was satisfying, the income a welcome supplement to my pension. In August, Janet Harrington called. Derek's been in touch, she said without preamble. He wants to know if you consider meeting. Just once, no legal discussions. I gazed out at my garden, heavy with tomatoes and zinnias. Not yet, I replied. Maybe someday. As my first year in the cottage drew to a close, I took stock of my new life. I'd made friends in town, real ones who knew nothing of my past, who liked me for who I was now. My consulting work was growing steadily. My small home had become a true sanctuary. One evening in late September, as I sat on my dock watching sunset turn the lake to flame, my phone buzzed with a text message from a Seattle number I didn't recognize. Asterisk, this is Amy, Derek's fiancée. We're expecting a baby in February. A girl. I know things are complicated, but I thought you should know. You're the only grandmother she'll have. Asterisk. Below was a grainy ultrasound image, a tiny profile visible among the shadows. I studied it for a long time as darkness fell around me, the phone's blue light illuminating my face. A grandchild. A blank slate. A new beginning, perhaps. I didn't respond that night. Or the next day. A week passed while I thought carefully about what, if anything, this changed. Finally, on a bright October morning, I wrote back. Congratulations. Children are a miracle and a responsibility. They reflect not just your genetics but your actions. I wish all three of you well. I added my mailing address, the first time I'd shared it with anyone connected to my old life. That evening, a package arrived from the local bookstore, special ordered weeks earlier, now finally in stock. I ran my fingers over the cover, Financial Independence for Women Over 60. Inside, I had been asked to write the foreword, drawing on my experiences building a new life after personal and financial upheaval. The author had asked me to include a personal dedication. After much thought, I had written. I gave him everything. And when he asked for what little I had left, I finally gave something to myself, freedom, Setting the book on my bedside table, I stepped onto my porch to watch the sunset. The air smelled of pine and approaching autumn. From somewhere across the lake came the call of a loon, haunting, solitary, and utterly at peace. I never did go back to my old life. But sometimes if you're brave enough to close one door firmly, another opens just wide enough to let in new light.